I'd like to start by introducing you to Kevin and how I know him. I saw him at a suicide prevention event back in 2012 with Grassroots in Brighton. I'm from Brighton. You're from?
Originally from Leicestershire, but
Okay.
I came to Brighton when I was 18 and I'm 36 now, so I've been here for half my life.
Yeah. Feels like home?
Oh yeah, I'm a Brightonian.
Yeah.
I couldn't not live by the sea now.
No, true. Me the same. So in my view, it was a privilege to meet you, but I also know that in your view, you didn't really want to meet any of us.
No, that's one way to put it.
Yeah, in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a bit about that evening and what brought you to that evening and how I had the pleasure of meeting you and you
Had the pleasure of meeting you.
Well, but,
yeah.
but not.
Yeah. So that was 2012, and it was a year where things kind of went, for want of a better term, went mad for me. I carried the Olympic torch that year. I ran from Paris to London. The previous year, I'd run 52 marathons. And all of these things were encapsulated by mental health. So that was 2012, but we kind of have to go all the way back to 2003. For where it started, and basically my dad killed himself, and it was during my freshers week at uni, and it had a profound effect on me, obviously.
So you were how old?
19.
Okay.
Yeah, just about to turn 20, and it was during freshers week at uni, so there's like this big social thing, meeting people, getting to know friendship groups, forming cliques, you know, all of that stuff. And basically dad died in freshers week and I had to go home, and I was
and
home,
your dad was
in Leicester.
Okay.
Yeah. And I went home for 2 weeks, so I missed out on that social formation of uni. Muddled through uni, you know, but I always just equated dad being dead with dad being dead. Not to do with mental health, not suicide, not stigma.
Okay.
I never sought counselling, never sought refuge anywhere, just kind of got on with life. And it was fine, and, you know, kind of went through uni and realised what I was doing was going through the motions. And then in 2007, I had my proper job. I graduated, all of that sort of stuff. I wasn't over dad's death, but I felt like I'd grieved and, you know, done the process of grieving. It was 4 years on. And then I had kind of a mini, very early midlife crisis and needed to lose some weight. I had to have reconstructive surgery on my shoulder, which meant I had 3 months without being able to leave my house.
Okay.
It was pretty major surgery. And because of that, I felt like I needed a goal at the end of those 3 months. So what I did was I entered the London Marathon. And that wasn't anything to do with my dad, but it later I realised formed for the entire basis of my use of exercise for positive mental health.
Okay.
And I loved and hated the marathon in equal measure, but signed up to more and more and more. And over the years, I started doing ultra marathons and stuff like that. And to cut a long story short, it got to the point where in 2010, I was talking to some friends, and one of them said, "You've done enough marathons, we're not going to give you any more money." And at this point, I wasn't even raising money for mental health charities, because I literally just picked a charity at random every year. I still didn't equate the fact that my dad was dead, mental health, me running. And then one of them went, "You'd have to do something stupid to get more money out of me." And
What, so in terms of your friends sponsoring you?
Yeah, because I was always fundraising. I always wanted to extract money from people.
But you were always doing it for random causes?
Yeah, like the first time was a breast cancer charity. Another one was a Brighton-based charity called Pass It On Africa, and they built schools in Kenya. And it was always through people I knew and other people's causes.
Okay.
I always felt like I didn't have a cause of my own, which is kind of weird looking back on it now. And then one of them said, "Yeah, you'd have to do something like 52 marathons. You know, I'd give you some money if you did one a week." So I just went, all right. And then I did it. And I realised early on that I needed something to engage my brain through those 52 weeks, because the same process, you know, it's like Groundhog Day every week. So I decided that I would start raising money for Rethink Mental Illness.
Okay.
And as well as that, and more important than that, I'd actually start blogging about men and mental health. So I started doing some research, and just the year before that, I'd sought the help of a counsellor because I felt like something in my brain hadn't properly switched, and I kept that from everyone.
What do you mean by that when you say something in your brain hadn't properly switched?
I felt like something was missing, and what was missing was grief and relief. I've said this before quite a lot of times to people, but when my dad killed himself, it wasn't unexpected. He'd attempted 7 times in total. So it was inevitable to us, to me, my brother, my sister and my mum. And it was like a terminal illness. You know, like each attempt was just another stage closer to being dead, and it was really sad. But what came of it was the initial feeling when my sister called me to tell me he was dead wasn't anger or grief or pain or anything like that. It was this overriding feeling of relief, because I felt like I would never feel that pain again, and that my life would now progress, because I felt like I was like in some sort of stasis, and it was awful, and I hated myself for it, and I couldn't overcome that feeling.
For having the feelings of relief?
Yeah, for feeling like my life could now go on because of that inevitability. So that was the relief, and the other was regret, because the night before my dad killed himself, I was out with some new friends, doing what freshers do, had a few drinks, and my dad tried to call me and I didn't pick up. I saw the call and I actively ignored it. And it took me years and years to come to terms with the fact that I felt like I could have stopped him. And the truth is, maybe I could, maybe I couldn't, but what's the point in being in this state of mind where you constantly assess what could have happened, because now it can't happen. And I think you have to be positive enough in yourself and confident enough to say you did what you could at the time, you did what you felt was right. Talking to my sister about it, she also missed a call from him that night, and we don't know whether he was absolutely beside himself. What I do know is that he'd spent probably 6 to 12 months in the year before repairing all of the relationships that he had with people, because he was mentally ill for a long time. And he would probably admit that he destroyed a lot of those relationships, including with me, including with my sister, but we all made up. So when he died, we felt he was in one of the best frames of mind that he'd been in for years. So it's kind of unexpected for that reason, but no other. So anyway, I talk a lot.
No, please.
We got 2011, I ran all these marathons. People started reading the blogs, and that year I didn't raise an awful lot of money. I raised £10,000, which is like huge. But when you cut it down to cost per marathon, 200 quid a marathon, like 400 quid a marathon, so it's really not worth it. I spent £5,000 of my own money that year travelling to runs, you know, buying trainers, all of that sort of stuff. So it became less about the money and more about the awareness. And people started reading my blog, and, you know, what started at the beginning of the year as like 10 mates, you know, paying faux interest in it. Just, I hit some sort of wave which carried me through, because I was a bloke, I was quite young, I was active, I knew someone who had killed themselves, and I was talking. And all of those things didn't really happen that much. And more people started doing it, and I kind of got braver and braver in how I was talking and the language I was using, and I realised that one of the issues people have around suicide and mental health isn't just that they don't talk about it, it's the way they talk about it, the communication, the taboo subject of it, the fact that nobody really digs deep into stuff. And ever since then, I've been focused on being an absolute open book about everything to do with mental health. I feel so privileged because I don't feel like I've ever had a mental illness. I've definitely had bad mental health, and we have to disaggregate those two. Mental health doesn't equal mental illness, just like physical health doesn't equal physical illness. But I've been low, but it took me years and years to even come to terms with the fact that I can be low, because I kind of feel like this pillar. And talking about it as a bloke, more and more people started getting in touch with me saying, I love this, you know, you're talking openly and honestly, and talked about how running became solace for me. It was like a therapy, because at that time I wasn't confident enough to see the therapist for long enough to get real benefit from it. But I realised running could be anything I wanted it to be. It could be just for physical exercise. It could be running so hard that I wanted to punish myself, like make myself feel sick, get a burning in my throat, you know. And obviously that becomes a metaphor for the fact that I'm willing to push myself that hard and not give up, unlike my dad, who did give up.
Yeah.
And that was a real like crutch for me at the time. Then there were the times where I would run, and I would literally go out and run and not think about how far I was going, where I was going to. My brain would just switch off. And I'm boring. I've never taken a single drug, but I can only assume it's what it's like to get a hit sometimes. And I forget almost everything to do with that run. And there have been times when I've gone out and covered 30 miles and just disengaged completely and like hit this blissful part of my brain. And then there's other times when I just go and plod along really slowly. But either way, it always benefited me. So I was talking about that, and I was talking about my perceptions of my dad and how I could have hated him, I could have been regretful, I could have been this and that, but ultimately he's dead. What can I do to benefit it? And in that same year, a few things happened in the news, which really affected the way that mental health is perceived. So Gary Speed died by suicide, and he was like famous footballer, rich, beautiful wife, big house, successful Wales manager. And yet he killed himself, and I wrote a blog about that, and it got published in The Guardian and ended up picking up like 50,000 hits, and more people were getting in touch. So and then I was being asked to comment on things in newspapers, and I was just a bloke with an experience, not a professional, and I was like, well, how far do you go with this stuff until you go, you know what, here's my line? And that line started coming when people were getting in touch with me saying, I'm suicidal, can you help me?
I remember you saying that, you know, and people reach out to me and telling me that they want to end their own life, and I want to help them but I can't, and it frightens me. How does that feel though when somebody does reach out to you? You don't know, just through this sort of platform that you've built that's brought so much good to so many people. The impact that you had on me personally was incredible, and that was only 2 years after I had been at my lowest point in my life, and had seriously been wanting to end my life and had gone and done some reckless things. You personally had an amazing effect on me and how open you were, and to be able to not look at it in such an insular way, because when you are feeling suicidal, which I was, it's not that you're not thinking about other people, it's that your vision is like this. It's like, you know, through a tiny scope, and you don't have that ability to do this in those moments, and that's the frightening part of it. So being part of Grassroots and that event and having you speak and listening to you, it was a very interesting dynamic for me to hear you talk like that. But then how do you feel when somebody who, like me, was in that crisis point comes to you in that crisis?
It's really difficult. I've always been pragmatic enough to want to help people. I would be lying if I said that my judgment has never changed. I probably started off with a bit of a fraudster complex, because I was someone with an experience, nothing more. But then I realised that anyone, whether it's academics, counsellors, therapists, etc., they go through a period of teaching, but effectively they wouldn't necessarily know more. And actually, what I came to realise after a few years was that the most important thing, regardless of who you talk to, regardless of how hard it is to admit it, is making sure that you yourself are not harmed by the work that you're doing. So there's an analogy I always use when I talk in schools, and it's basically, if you're on an aeroplane and they say the aeroplane's going down, if the oxygen mask drops, then you put yours on first and then you help the people around you. With mental health, it's exactly the same. If you're not in the right frame of mind, if you're not resilient enough and strong enough, and your mental health isn't good enough, you cannot help people around you. So I've always used that. And there have been times when I've never ignored anyone, but there have been times when I've focused more on other people than myself, and it's not been good for me. But ultimately, all you can do is refer people to the right places. You know, so I've acted as a signpost basically, and there've been times when I've and we have to remember these are absolute strangers to me. I have had friends get in touch, and that's kind of reassuring. And lots of people that I know ask me for advice, but when it's pure strangers, all you can do is signpost them. You can listen and you can be there, but you have to be absolutely explicit and say, there's nothing I can really do apart from listen. I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
I can't do this, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But here's the people to contact.
Yeah.
Or, and there have been some crises that I've been involved in where I've had to contact the emergency services on behalf of somebody hundreds of miles away. And I never want to be seen as being responsible for anybody's demise,
No.
you know, and you bring that risk with you when you open yourself up to the world so much that if they start relying on you too much and you say something that's misconstrued or that they don't agree with, it's a real challenge. And one of the big things for me is about language around mental health and suicide. You know, there are lots of people with lots of opinions, and my opinion probably doesn't sit with other people's a lot of the time, especially the official bodies. And my opinion is that so long as there's no malice in the language you use and you're not against other people, say what the hell you want if you feel empowered to say it. So my brother and I, you know, we have dark sensitive humour, and when we talk about my dad, in passing we'll say when dad topped himself. Now that's not okay to a lot of people, but to us it opens up a window, because I couldn't imagine talking to my very working class brother and going, when dad chose to die by suicide. It doesn't sit right with us. So it's about dynamics of language and the intonation and all of that, you know. And there are times where you have to correct people and challenge people.
But then I'm sure you wouldn't walk up to a complete stranger and speak like that.
No, absolutely. And I've challenged people on that. You know, I remember being on a train to London once, and just outside Three Bridges, the train stopped and said, we're going to be here for a while. Somebody has fallen in front of the train, which is an analogy for somebody killing themselves. And this businessman rang up his office and he said, I'm going to be late. Some selfish bastard has topped himself on the train. And I felt empowered enough, and this was not long ago, 3 or 4 years, and I felt empowered enough by then, knowing what I know, to say, excuse me, that's not okay for you to say that, and this is why. Think of that person's family. Imagine it was your son. You know, maybe they had a crisis, and I don't want to sound like some cheesy idiot, but people started clapping after I said that. And other people were like, so good that, you know, you felt like you were able to do that kind of thing.
No, it is. And the more that people do it, the more that it will change.
Exactly.
I mean, things from when I met you in 2012 till now have drastically changed. And it's great. I do think there's a lot more that needs to be done for men. Because I still feel that it's more taboo for guys than girls, and in a world where women are campaigning for equal rights, then this is a bit out of balance, and it's the other way around, you know, like it's more acceptable for, not it is, but I think it's easier to accept that a girl can struggle, whereas a guy should man up.
Absolutely.
You know, but yet we're wanting women to be as empowered as men. So I mean, it has to go both ways, in my view.
I think it's a really interesting concept that men need to be strong. And I played rugby growing up, you know, and we were all about having fights and being blokes and you know, and fitting into those kind of gender stereotypes. It is changing slowly, but even those more vocal about other people's health aren't looking after their own, especially amongst men. Suicide's the biggest killer of men in the UK aged between 40 and 50. Nothing kills more men than suicide. It's the only disease that you can guarantee to cure in some ways. You know, it's about education. The problem is that the money that we invest in curing other illnesses proportionally is absolutely tiny for mental health, and that's treatment for it. We spend no money, quite literally no money, on prevention. You know, so we have recommended daily allowances of different foods. Don't eat bacon, it gives you cancer, etc., etc. But there is nothing within our youth budget, you know, amongst young people, schools, societies, whatever, in like making children aware of what might happen to their mental health. And if we don't invest in preventing, we will constantly be chasing our own tails in trying to cure later, you know.
Of course. I always say to a lot of people that I know at school, they'll teach you how to add up, they'll teach you how to spell, get taught how to do your shoelaces. But who teaches you how to look after your emotional well-being?
Yeah.
Who teaches you how to interact and communicate? Who teaches you what a healthy relationship is? Who teaches you what a boundary is? I mean, I've only just been learning this very, very recently. Healthy boundaries with family, with work, with friends, with everything. Like you were saying, put your own gas mask on first. I've always had a bit of a narrative that you should always put others first, but actually that does come at your own detriment.
It does, and especially for parents as well. You know, when you look at archetypal mums and dads, they give up everything for their kids. And I've got a 6-year-old, and I can totally get why, and I would lay across dirt for that kid if it meant him not getting his shoes muddy, you know. And it's really, really difficult to draw that line. And I think one of my biggest strengths in the past couple of years is admitting to myself that I enjoy time without him being around, because you become consumed by looking after others and forget to look after yourself.
Even in the small things, I'm not a mother. I have lots of friends who are parents, and I'm Auntie Emma to about 100 kids, which I'm forever grateful for. I love them all, and sometimes I think they're mine. But I often see my friends putting themselves at the bottom of the pile, and it's in the name of love, and I get it, and it's wonderful. However, what are you teaching your children? You're teaching your children that they come last when they get to be your age.
Exactly.
You know, I watched my mum put everybody else before herself, including me. But actually, when you really think about what that little person's watching and learning, they're learning, oh, well, when I'm old, I go last. You know? So it is a balance, and I'm not a parent, so I can't speak from experience, but I can see that doing the thing for yourself and showing your children that it's important to do things for yourself as well. I'm not saying discount them, you know, let them fend for themselves.
But it's about balance, isn't it? It's like, when I was a kid, I always remember thinking that my dad was the strongest man in the world. And he was the strongest man in the world to me because he didn't cry.
Okay.
And, you know, he was diminutive stature. He was 5'5", you know, like 10 stone wet through. But he was dead strong because he never cried. And I realise now that that was a weakness and not a strength of his, you know. I will hold my hands up. I'm a massive pussy when it comes to a lot of stuff, because I will cry at my kids doing the cutest of things, you know. I have conversations with him. I deliver these talks to school children about, you know, being okay with who you are regardless, and looking after each other and stuff like that. And I'll talk about my dad's suicide, you know, like with a dead straight face and not worry about getting upset. But then when I say, but here's why my life has changed, and I start showing pictures of my kid who's alive and healthy and thriving and amazing, that's what will choke me up. And I realise now that my dad, it's not that he didn't cry, it's that he didn't often show emotion. And the first time I remember him crying was at my nana's funeral when I was like 9 or 10. Literally had never seen him cry before then. The second time I saw him cry was when I was 16. I just picked up my GCSE results. My family haven't got a great academic history, and I did really well. And he cried when I gave him my results, and like seeing a man cry through happiness was like, why the hell is this happening? And then the third time I ever saw him cry was when he'd attempted suicide, and he was sobbing, you know, uncontrollably. And that was it. And I could probably tell you I've cried in the last week, maybe twice already, you know. And I think I've learned from him, you know, when I talk to Jesse about him, I don't try to sugarcoat what's happened in his life and my life. I talk openly, and Jesse asks questions as a 6-year-old, and I obviously choose what I say very carefully. But what I also say to him and anyone else that will listen is that I've learned the best things from my dad of what he was like as a dad, and he did some amazing stuff, you know. But I've also learned the things that he didn't do well, and I've tried not to do those and become a better person for it. And I think sometimes we forget when people die that there were negative sides of their life as well as positive.
Yeah.
You know, we always shine a light on people who have passed away, but there are things that they weren't good at, you know.
And I think that's the same even for people who just, their parents are still alive. It's very easy to put parents on a complete pedestal, and I think that's where a lot of our sort of defeating narratives can come from, because you put them on a pedestal and you expect a pedestal kind of relationship, and that all just becomes quite messy sometimes. But I think we can even do that when they're still alive. You know, we just think that they are like godly. I know, especially for myself, you know, with a difficult father relationship, you know, with my natural father and my stepfather, I spent a good number of years just, you know, like God. But actually, guess what? They're just human.
Yeah, exactly. And with us seeing them as godlike, they then feel like they have to be godlike and not make mistakes. And if they do make mistakes, cover them up, because you can't see them, because then, you know, you see their kind of fallibility. So it just perpetuates, and it goes round and round like that until something unravels and something terrible happens, or until there's like an intervention that makes them rethink the way that they are. And men don't have those opportunities to rethink like women do, like children do. So, you know, it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. I think things have improved. Like, you know, he's been dead for 16 years or thereabouts, a bit longer maybe now. And the world is changing. People are more open. There are more interventions, you know. But these, I don't want to get too politicised, but these interventions aren't the result of national governmental changes and investments. These are the realisations of normal people like you doing these things to open conversations. And without those people, we'd be screwed.
No, you know? I agree.
It's lovely to see things like in the UK we have men's sheds, which is literally where a bunch of blokes will turn up and there's a
men's
shed.
Sheds.
Yeah, it's an amazing initiative. So there's like these shed. I mean, I say shed, they're gigantic sheds.
Okay.
But blokes turn up and they do blokes things like cut wood and, you know, and chat and box. But with this notion that they're there because of mental health charities are funding it, and therefore it opens a conversation, you know. Because men won't go to, or certain men of certain ages won't go to, like Marks and Spencer has this amazing thing called the Frazzled Cafe. Which is like, I don't know which Marks and Sparks do it, but basically they do half price tea and coffee, and if you turn up between the hours of 10 and 11, basically it's the Frazzled Cafe, where people who are struggling or just want to chat or whatever, lonely, you know, suffered a death, bereavement, whatever, can just turn up and talk to strangers. But blokes won't do that. So the men's sheds are like the bloke's ability to do it. And whilst I don't conform to lots of gender stereotypes, if blokes feel like they need to continue to be blokes, and that's an open forum, do it, you know.
And it's a great space.
I'm from a rugby playing background. You know, rugby players are hard. They're stupid, but they're hard. And they're opening up. Rugby is opening up these conversations like never before, you know. Caroline Flack died a couple of weeks ago, and it's shown everything that's bad about the tabloid newspapers. But if we can glean anything from it, it's that she shouldn't have died. But the positivity that's coming out of it hopefully will have a knock-on effect. Danny Cipriani, rugby player, her ex-boyfriend, he did the most amazing video.
Oh, I saw it. And the part about shame, for me, was just massive. And that's what we were touching on a bit earlier, is that for me, it's the shame that's the monster in the room. Because the shame that we put on ourselves, now whether that be because we've done something that we deem really awful and we can't bear the thought of someone knowing what we've done, and the shame that it will bring, the shame that we think it will bring on our family and our work, and what if everyone knew, and you can't bear that, or the shame of financial hardships. These are big ones. You know, when I left school, I went and did my training to work in a funeral home, in a mortuary, to look after people. So that's what I'm actually trained to do. And I have looked after a lot of people that have taken their own life, and a lot of them are men. And some of them I know were for financial problems, and everything was too overwhelming and they just couldn't bear it, and they were left in a space where they were so full of shame they didn't see any other option.
We have to allow a release valve for people somewhere, because, you know,
otherwise they find it themselves.
Even the best pressure cooker will explode.
Yeah.
I had a lady get in touch with me maybe like 8 or 9 years ago now, and she'd come across my blogs and she said, I'm getting in touch because my other half killed himself last year and I'm really struggling, but I want to do something positive. What can I do to help? And at the time I was trying to make a video around suicide, people literally saying the word, and the idea was to go across social media platforms and ask people to film themselves just saying the word suicide, so that it became a normal thing. And she worked in TV production. She's like, I could put that together for you. And I was like, brilliant, maybe we could film something together. She said, oh, I can't be seen on there. And I said, oh, it's a real shame, I won't push you, but, you know, it's a real shame. She said, I'd love to, but nobody knows he killed himself because his parents told everyone he died in a car crash. And I was just like, I was blown away, because she now has to live with his suicide, dealing with her own mental health, and not being able to talk about it to a lot of people because his family took the step of telling everyone.
Well, and then that she's never going to be able to show up authentically in a conversation about that grief and loss.
And what does that say about both his shame and theirs? To not be able to admit it? And it kind of, you know, and that was literally the reason I was making that video, was so that people like that didn't do what they did. You know, and she said, I can't challenge them on it, you know, but I don't know what to do otherwise. And what do you do? Because then you're in this position where you don't want to upset or offend anyone, and the family would have been grieving, and you know, but then so would she, and in the end she moved to the States and started a new life because she couldn't hack, you know, that
would be very, I mean, I cannot imagine being in that position, but it's incredibly difficult to deal with, because even just the bumping into someone in the street and that conversation happening about such a big event that's just happened in your life, and we don't have to, but you're in this position where you can't show up and be authentic about it, which in itself must just be debilitating.
Yeah, so much of it's personality based, and I used to have different thoughts to what I have now about people who avoid the conversation. I remember in the week after my dad died, I went back home and I was walking down the street, and one of my rugby team was walking in the opposite direction, and he saw me, and he'd obviously heard what had happened, and he ducked into a shop and he avoided me, and that really hurt. Really hurt. And I thought, I hate him. And now, of course I don't hate him, and we haven't spoken since, but it's not because of that. Life goes on. But then the day after that, I was in the pub with another mate of mine who's just an amazing guy. And then someone else came up who I used to play rugby with, and he went, all right, Kev. And, hi, Nick, how you doing? And he went, I heard about your dad, mate. I'm so sorry he's dead. And I was like, thanks, mate, that means a lot. And he said, I nearly died once, you know, and then just started talking to me. And and it lightened the entire conversation, because to him, he hadn't thought beyond death. It was just death, and that was sad. It wasn't, can't talk about suicide, can't. And he just went into our rhetoric about how he nearly died. But it lightened the entire mood to the point where I was like, that's the outlook we need.
Yeah.
Just that somebody's dead and that's sad doesn't matter why they're dead, how they're dead. It's just the shame that they're dead.
Yeah.
You know, the outcome is the same regardless. And that made me realise that, you know, Nick, lovely guy, rugby player, stupid. And because of that, didn't think beyond it. He didn't overthink. And I think a lot of the time people who choose not to engage in the conversation choose not to do it, not because they don't care, but because they're scared of what the outcomes might be. Whether it might trigger yourself, because we know that people who have been affected by suicide are more likely to die by suicide. Whether you're ashamed of it and they don't want to bring it up, because if you are, then you might get embarrassed, run off or whatever. Or just because they don't know what to say.
I've had people who have said to me, when I have bipolar, so I have ups and downs to manage for the rest of my life. So, and sometimes the lows are challenging. And I've had people who I know love me, who I know care about me, sort of shuffle up to me sort of awkwardly and say, I don't really know what to say to you. And I'll be honest, I don't know whether to talk to you about it or to not talk to you about it, because I'm worried that if I talk to you about it, if I talk to you and ask you about being suicidal, does that make you want to do it more? Or so there is a lot of fear, but it comes from love. Is what I have found.
Yeah, and we need to empower people to initiate conversations, to have difficult conversations, because there's no doubt they're difficult.
Yeah.
But also to challenge behaviour as well. Suicidal people, you know, by their nature, they're usually mentally ill.
Yeah.
They usually aren't thinking straight. You know, not in your right mind is a term that lots of people use.
Yeah.
And so many people walk on eggshells around those people to the point where it's of no benefit to have the conversation, and we need to actually go, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Emma, feeling like that is not okay. And doing this is not okay.
Yeah.
Not the whole Hollywood, think of your family and, you know, you've got the world to live for. Just, that's not all right.
Yeah.
Actually, there are alternatives, and here they are.
Yeah.
I talked on a panel a while back, and it was me, the victim of suicide, an academic who did research into suicidal thoughts, and another academic who runs a suicide bereavement centre. And a lady in the audience, you know, it opened the floor to questions, and this lady said, I want to die. She said, I just can't get through my life. I can't be here anymore. And I answered first, and I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. There are ways, there are means, people you can speak to. And then one of the academics said, don't do it. You can't do it. It's not okay. You absolutely cannot die. Talk to us afterwards. We will help you. And the other academic said, and I don't see any of these people being right or wrong, but the other academic said, I don't know you. I don't know your life. I can encourage you not to die, but ultimately if you choose to do it, it's your decision. What are we going to be? And each of our points had valid responses, you know. Yeah. I don't know whether I could have stopped my dad dying. I don't know whether him being alive would have been for the greater good, if I'm honest, because it's really sad that he's not here, but I've made a hell of a life out of him dying in a way which is sometimes, you know, forgotten. I've gained an awful lot in my life because I've used his death to positively influence myself and others. And I'd be beautifully naive if he was still around, because I wouldn't know about this stuff. I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't have carried the Olympic torch. I wouldn't have become a personal trainer. I wouldn't have met the people that I've met. So you've got to weigh everything up and just think, you know, we have to make the best of what we have got, or of course what we haven't got anymore, and add some value to it. And it's what people have done around the death of Caroline Flack. It's what I did around the death of my dad. But ultimately, we don't want any of it to happen, and we just want it to be intrinsic within society for people just to be nice. Yeah. You know, it's that simple. Yeah. Ask someone how they're doing. Northern people are so much better than Southern people at that. You're on a bus.
Tell me about that.
And they'll go...
What do you mean?
They'll be like, you all right? And if Southern people go up north and a Northerner asks them if they're all right, they're like, well... In London, you can't even catch someone's eye, but, you know... And I think we've got a responsibility in society just to look out for everyone. Yeah. Stop buying all the toilet paper, you know. Stop buying all the hand sanitizer.
Honestly, I landed yesterday. I texted you. I landed yesterday, and we were driving down, and I saw a guy on a bicycle, and on each of his handlebars he had 3 maxi packs on each, and he was like this. Yeah. Down the road. I was, what is going on here?
It's nuts, you know, and it's this. And I don't know whether it's just British, but this notion that charity starts at home means that regardless of what else is happening around you, you make sure that you have everything that you need and more than enough. Which means that because of this COVID-19 like disaster that's coming and will come, everyone's bought everything of importance. There's no paracetamol. There's no toilet paper. It doesn't even give you the shits. That's the thing about this disease. And there's no hand sanitizer.
In Dubai, we've got hoses.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different world, isn't it? You know.
I mean, we have the option of both. I'm sure that Westerners, you know, we use toilet paper, but
the bidet is not a British thing because we're so conservative about it. But it just goes back to the whole idea that you don't look out for those around you, and actually you just panic and make sure that just, you know, your immediate vicinity is okay.
It's those questions, isn't it? You know, how are you? Yeah, I'm all right. And it's just so sort of on the surface. And I, in my professional work, have worked in operations for the last over a decade, and I do think it's important to actually ask the question, how are you feeling today? is a really good question to ask some people, you know, rather than just, how are you, all right? Yeah, you know, just this kind of like on the surface
everything's
chat.
superficial. Yeah, there was I forget who ran it, but there was a campaign a couple of years ago called Ask It Twice. And I was like, how you doing, Emma? You'd be like, yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, but how are you?
Yeah, how are you? How are you?
Because really it opens up a door for people to go, actually, it's not great. You know, we've got to be willing to ask difficult questions and expect difficult answers.
Yeah.
And we're superficial humans, so sometimes all you want is the person to go, yeah, I'm all right, and you're like, brilliant, bye. And actually what you need to do is go, you've been a bit different.
Yeah.
You know, you're not usually late for work and you've been in late. Are you okay? I'm not worried about you being late, but it's out of the ordinary, you know. Let's go and have a coffee. Yeah. Let's go and have a walk. And that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Because it shows people not only that you care, but you've got the time to care more if they need you to. Because we won't ask for help, and it goes back to that conversation we had about shame and strength. The vast majority of people are too strong, in my opinion, not strong enough to go, I'm drowning, give me some help.
I think sometimes people don't know how to identify their emotions either.
Yeah.
We're not taught, that's sort of going back to what we were just saying, we're not taught how to work or identify, or even identify our emotions properly as kids. We get taught by our parents, and who were our parents taught by? Their parents. So let's think about it. We're now being taught by what, 3 generations before us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty outdated. We probably need to get a bit more current than that. So, you know, our parents weren't sent to school on emotional awareness and how to teach all of these things. So it's something that what I see is we tend to be learning as we're adults, by which point a lot of the damage has already been done, and then we're undoing everything and trying to put everything back together and wondering why we're not coping as adults when we should be coping as adults, because guess what, we're grown up now.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what we're doing still. So
and we can only influence future generations though by ensuring that older generations get that. You know, I work in higher education, and I get a lot of questions from, you know, builder dads being like, why does my son need to go to uni? I'm a builder, I've done all right. And you explain that it's not about the money, you know. They might earn more, they might earn less, but they'll see the world, they'll meet different people, you know, they get this, they get that. And they go, oh, all right, well, I'd quite like to have been there or done that. And it's influencing adults to influence children, you know. I talk to Jesse about it all the time because I know an awful lot about it, and therefore he'll be all right. I kind of hope that he passes on that wisdom to children around him whose parents don't see that vulnerability is okay. And, you know, working with different groups of people on their approach to this stuff, you know, it doesn't even, like, it's not being in another country that affects it, it's being in another social class that affects it. The working classes don't engage with mental health like the middle classes do, for instance. And the upper classes don't either, because they're too posh to have problems, you know what I mean? So we sometimes feel that mental health is only acceptable in certain areas, and that could be certain genders, certain age groups, certain disabilities, certain social classes. But it just encompasses everyone.
Mental illness can come to anybody.
Of course.
And the strongest of people. And I think that's when it's really hard, because someone who deems themselves as strong, the pillar of the family, or to then be in a place of crisis and not be able to speak, must just be horrendous, because then you've got no way of speaking.
Exactly. I liken it to picking up a virus. You know, if we link physical and mental health, no matter how fit and healthy you are, you might pick up a virus and you become physically ill. Mental health the same. You might get through 99% of your year mentally perfect, you know, in dreamland, but there could be that one thing that you interact with, you know, that one sneeze that affects your mental health. There could be that one accident that would break your ankle physically but has caused a crisis mentally, you know. And as soon as people start realising that having a mental illness doesn't mean that it's chronic, doesn't mean that it will never go away.
No.
You know, bipolar is manageable over time. Some people argue you can cure it, other people say you can't, but it's always manageable.
Mm-hmm.
But other mental health crises can disappear completely, and you can go back to full
seasonal,
health. Absolutely,
for sure.
Yeah.
You can have a bad season, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But the important thing is to not let that bad season turn into an all-out crisis that is unresolvable.
Exactly.
And the reason that I'm doing these things and talking to you today is because I feel really passionate about talking, because I know that it is the only way to make this better. And yes, there's medical intervention and there's support and there's therapy, but if we don't do the first bit, which is speak, the rest can't happen.
Yeah, we've got to have the conversations, haven't we?
Yeah.
And things like this, you know, they could, you know, say, I don't know, a couple hundred people watch this, one person might utterly engage with it, and they spread it. And they spread it, and they spread it, you know, it's like a pandemic. And it ends up going, you know, around the world, and before you know it, you know, you could have influenced hundreds of people, you could have influenced just one. But the effort of us chatting for an hour could completely change somebody else's outlook.
And it's that thing that you said where you were in the underground on the train and you had the confidence to speak.
Yeah.
It's about people saying, well, if they can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah.
They can stand there and stand in what they believe to be their truth, rather than just being silenced because of a social pressure. And actually, no, I don't feel okay today, and I feel okay to say that. Or ask somebody. I have a friend who recently is going, and currently is going through a crisis right now, and you know, the friends around, we're trying to work out how best to support that person. And I'm abroad. I'm in a different country, so you feel very helpless and powerless when you're so far away, because we're humans and we like to be able to get our hands on something and fix it, right? Especially if it's in your nature to be a bit of a fixer. And in the end, I just said to her, do you know, I am really worried. Are you feeling suicidal right now? Are you considering suicide right now? Has this been something that's on your mind? Let's talk about it. And you do have to take some time, you know, a breath before you say something like that. Like, oh God. Yeah, but it's a conversation that matters, and it's not easy, but it's really important, because then that gives the person the opportunity to check themselves and say, oh, even if does that resonate with me? No, that's not where I'm at. I'm just here. And then you can gauge how you can support that person, or it gives them the opportunity to say without the shame, I have. Yeah.
We've got to empower people who feel suicidal to make the change themselves. And it's okay to say to them, I can't do this for you. Yeah. That old, you know, analogy of you can take a horse to water but can't make it drink is never true of them with a suicidal person, because if they're not in the position to want to change and to want to improve and make things better, no matter what you say to them, no matter what you do for them, it can't happen. And my brother lived with me for a while, and he was having some real issues, and it took me a long time to realise that following him around, doing everything for him, being scared to say things that might upset him, just perpetuated the notion that he was helpless.
Yes.
And that, frankly, he could take advantage of the fact that I was doing everything for him. I was giving him money left, right and centre. I was taking him to places, you know, I was his personal butler. And I spoke to his psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, this is really difficult to do, but you've got to let go of some of that control.
Yeah. And
there were times when he would threaten to go and kill himself, and I would follow him and say, you can't do this, come with me, you know, and I'll be hysterical. And then the psychiatrist said, don't do that. Say to him, that's not okay, I don't want you to do it, but ultimately I can't stop you, and let him walk out the door. That's scary.
Oh my God.
Because if it goes wrong, you've got a dead person, and the guilt would be huge. But it empowered my brother when he saw me not following him to think, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
And he would come back and he'd go, I'm sorry, I've had time to think.
Yeah.
And that slowly got better, and we had more of these conversations, and I'd feel more confident, you know, and you realise like a communication technique that suits everyone.
Yeah.
And it's empowering to say to people, you're the only person that can do this. We will help you. We'll provide what you need. But ultimately, this is your life. You live with yourself 24/7. Nobody else does, because we can all remove ourselves from you. Yeah. So you've got to be happy to put the effort in and to reap the rewards from it. And it takes a long time, and it's a battle. And if they don't want to change, they won't. But ultimately, we can only do what we can do to the point where, you know, you have to hold your hands up and say, this is affecting me too much now.
And as somebody who has definitely been in a very bad space, I think initially when I had my breakdown, you know, nearly 10 years ago, I would have considered myself as a very strong person and all of these things. But when I started to have those feelings, I was terrified because I just didn't know what was happening to me. And since then, obviously, with the highs and lows, that old familiar feeling comes back to me, and I don't have the same level of fear because I know I've had it in its past. But I think it's important for people that, I hate to say new to that experience, but is having those feelings for the first time. It's important for you to know that it can be different and it can pass. But the first step is having the confidence to talk and not to feel like you're failing by talking, because I think for me, I used to feel like I need to fix this on my own, because if I can't, I'm failing at everything else. So I at least need to be able to fix myself.
Yeah.
And then when you realise you can't fix yourself in a capsule, because you just don't get better that way, then you feel like you're failing at that as well. Then you feel like you failed at everything.
Absolutely. We have to treat ourselves and our bodies like vehicles in a way, and realise that I'm not a mechanic. There's some things I can do. I'm a qualified personal trainer, so there are things I could do to my body that improve my health. But, you know, I can't deal with my head. I can't fix my teeth. I can't, you know, do this or that. And that's okay. Other people are skilled to do it. So actually you go, I need to go to this person. You know, you wouldn't ask a bricklayer to plaster your wall.
No.
They might do an all right job of it, but they're not a plasterer. And it's the same across all skills. You know, you can't be brilliant at everything.
No.
And it's okay to be like, I'm going to have to go to a professional for this, you know. And it took me, like I said, years and years. And the only time I've had proper counselling where I've been week in, week out for a long period of time was after my marriage broke down. I see myself as one of the strongest, most resilient people around. If I'm in a race with somebody, you know, I live for running, they're not going to beat me mentally. They might be faster runners, and that's kind of okay. I don't give up. I will run however long, however hard I need to. But that knocked me for 6. And it was the first point since Dad died where I went, I'm too low to deal with this on my own. And it was massive because I kind of set myself on this pedestal of being the mental health guy. And that made me think I was too strong to need help, when actually it took me a lot of time and a conversation with one of my best mates to go, you know what, I'm going to burden somebody else with this. And we sat there and we talked about, you know, the breakdown of the marriage and other things that could be making me feel sad. And I realised that it was grief that I was feeling again. And part of that grief was my dad, because I'm, you know, if I think about it, I get sad. Part of it was the grief of my marriage dying. And part of it was grief around my life completely changing. And then the therapist, who was lovely, and I can't say she was particularly skilled. She didn't come across as like, you know, this incredible epiphany style goddess of a woman. She just sat and listened. And I paid her good money, and it was a stranger, but it was so enlightening because she'd ask questions and then leave me to talk. And that's what I needed and what I wanted. And I didn't feel like I could do that with a friend, because they might, not they might judge me, but they'd have a bias in some way, you know. My mates stick up for me, so they'd be like, oh, no, it's definitely not your fault. And actually, I just needed somebody to be like, but have you thought about it this way? So a completely level, you know, approach. And I work in management, and it's an approach I take with some of the people that work with me now. I'll ask them questions that allow them to elaborate. in any way they feel appropriate. And it's really enlightening to be able to do it.
It is. And I think therapy is great, and this is kind of what I was saying about what you get taught at school. We tend to come to therapy in crisis, sadly.
Yeah.
I actually think it should be something that's kind of part of the curriculum.
Yeah, the Californian approach. You know,
Really?
if you're a rich Californian, you see a therapist regardless of how healthy you are.
I really think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's not just fat people that see personal trainers, right?
Yeah.
You know, muscular people, really fit people continue to see PTs because they want to continue to develop. Should be the same with therapists.
I think so, and I just think it's an area that we really lack in, and we rely wholly on our parents to teach us all of our emotional skills. Well, who made them experts?
Yeah.
And there's no blame there,
No.
right? They're great people, and as a parent, I'm sure every parent does their very best, and they would do, like you say, you'd lay down to save them in a heartbeat. But it doesn't make you an expert in these areas. So I just think it's really important, and there's no harm can come from having a conversation. No harm can come from going to a therapy session and unloading a little.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
can only feel lighter.
Yeah.
So in my view, there's no harm that can come from it. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, thank you for today.
Thanks for listening to me. I love talking about myself, so it's fine.
Thank you for coming today, and I think this will be good for a lot of people.
Hopefully, and you know, hopefully they'll pick up that people like you do this kind of thing, not because it does anything other than wants to help, and you know, it's a privilege to be able to do it. So thank you.
And before we go, Run Things. Tell me quickly about that.
My little side hustle, as it were.
Yeah.
So I created Run Things with a friend of mine who I met through the charity Mind, and we basically created this accidental business. So we marry together physical and mental health because they're so intrinsically linked. And basically we put on running-based activities, at the moment mostly virtual events, and we have a virtual running club as well that's got like 500 members. And it's about creating a community of people who take part in the events to raise money for charity, to improve their mental health, and generally to be a part of a community that they wouldn't otherwise meet. So we've got people in Dubai in it, Australia, New Zealand, USA, Barbados, lots in the UK, and hopefully it'll continue to grow. So yeah, if people want to check it out, it's runthings.co.uk.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening, and I look forward to introducing you to my guest in my next episode.